Hey, everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's slightly underest the weather music nerd, but I am here to talk to you about basically my thoughts on this recent Super Bowl halftime show performance from Adam Levine and Maroon 5 and then the whole gang. Um, every year, the Super Bowl halftime performances are usually a big point of cultural conversation because usually they're very extravagant and over the top, and who gets picked and how they perform is usually discussed for days and days and days and days. And there are plenty of musical moments that have gone down at the Super Bowl, from Michael Jackson to Beyonce to Missy Elliott essentially coming back onto the map. And I can't really say we came out of this recent Super Bowl performance with anything like that whatsoever, honestly. I mean, I think one thing that kind of kneecapped the full potential of this Super Bowl performance is maybe there was a limited list of artists who would actually perform front and center in the way that Maroon 5 did. There were a lot of people going into the game that were unhappy about the ongoing tensions between the NFL and concerns amongst the Black Lives Matter movement and Colin Kaepernick fans and so on and so forth. I mean, Lord knows that Travis Scott and Big Boy, who did take part in the performance, did catch some flack online for taking part in it. But for whatever reason, we ended up in a place where we were delivered nothing but a heaping helping of really stale old Maroon 5 hits, because when was the last time anybody really cared about most of the songs that Maroon 5 played on that stage? I mean, they're certainly not the first band whose maybe time in the limelight came and went in a way. However, I think Maroon 5's hits have not really withstood the test of time in the way that some older artists like Paul McCartney played the Super Bowl one time has over the years. And honestly, when Adam Levine and the band kicked it off at first, the first couple of tracks were pretty rough in terms of performance, especially on the vocal end of things, considering Adam Levine's connections to the voice. One might think that his singing might have been a little bit more on point throughout the entirety of the performance, but it actually was not for the first two tracks. And their performance really was a shortened medley of a bunch of different songs they've done over the years, not really a full performance of any one single track. There were a lot of transitions in and out of their tracks into other sections of the performance. But still, the first couple of tracks they played from the Maroon 5 catalog sounded like Adam Levine was just straight shower singing. Can't really say I enjoyed anything about it outside of just how tight the band sounded in the background. And I think the entirety of the performance would have been completely useless, boring, drab, and not worth commenting on at all if it weren't for the many incredible, most likely expensive, and very ambitious transitions throughout the entirety of the performance. Immediately after a couple of Maroon 5 tracks, they transitioned into a bit of video from that episode of SpongeBob where they play Sweet Victory. And instead of going into Sweet Victory, which is kind of a meme going into the Super Bowl, people thought would be included into the musical performance, instead of going into that, they transitioned into Travis Scott's Sicko Mode. So, I mean, full 2019 sicko mode, Travis Scott, trap rap, and SpongeBob memes, essentially. So, I mean, it was really kind of the most maybe not 2019, but the most 2018 thing I've ever witnessed. It only took us until 2019 to actually get there. And Travis Scott's performance was kind of rough. He was okay. They had to cut out some chunks of his vocals because of obviously the censors and so on and so forth. And it sounded like he was just shouting his brains out and doing his best to keep the energy up, but it was not really that great of a transition. And I guess it was unexpected and surprising, or would have been for anybody who wasn't in the know. But outside of that, I don't know, it just kind of served as like a bit of a distraction or a nice breather from having to listen to Maroon 5. Miraculously, though, when the band came back with hits like She Will Be Loved, the singing was actually quite a bit better. The band sounded tighter. Seemed like they were getting a little bit more ambitious with some extra musicians brought into the fold. They had a drum line, and then at one point they brought in an entire like gospel chorus, the lead of which was going absolutely freaking insane. And that's another thing, like the mixing of a lot of the vocals and the instrumentation was kind of janky. Eventually Big Boy came into the fold and performed "I Like the Way She Moves," and you could barely hear him for the first leg of his whole piece of his performance, though I do think instrumentally they were really true to form on the track, and I really did enjoy like a lot of the colors and lights that were happening. I mean, it was certainly great and well executed enough to distract from the fact that a lot of the time the performances and the singing were just okay. You know what I mean? The fact that you had the horn section there and the wardrobe changes, and you had the dude like frickin' spinning records on the turntable. I mean, it's like they really did a full musical transition over to this Big Boy track, and instrumentally it sounded really tight. Instrumentally it sounded really great. I mean, if there's anything again that saved this performance and made it really surprising or at least engaging, was just all the transitions and whoever the genius was who orchestrated the whole production of this thing. Because for everything that happened across the entirety of this performance, it essentially condenses down into a pretty tight 13 minutes. One wouldn't think that you would fit in these images of, lanterns flying into the sky and spelling out "One Love," and Big Boy riding in on a car, and then the drum line and the choral line, and Adam Levine ripping off his jacket only to reveal this really horrid shirt that looks like a curtain that you would buy at frickin' Target or something, and then removing his shirt from there and showing us a tattoo palette that looks like what you do when you go into the tattoo parlor and just pick whatever is on the wall and just fill me up with it, dude. Just fill me up with it. Yeah, I mean, they came to a pretty heavy ending, I guess, with a lot of pyrotechnics, very over the top. Sounded like a real freaking rock band, man. Oh, it's Maroon 5 set is so heavy. I guess it was a very explosive finish. I will say it ended stronger than it started, as those first couple of Maroon 5 tracks and the SpongeBob transition were corny as hell. But outside of that somewhat decent ending and a lot of the very expensive bells and whistles that surrounded this entire thing to make it look really out there and wacky and distracting, because there was never really a reason to settle on or focus on one single thing for too long. There was always a changeover happening to something else. There was always a progression heading in another direction. I don't know, if we didn't have that distraction throughout the entire thing, I think people would come to realize that it was a lot more mediocre than it actually might have been. So I don't know, the musical performances generally pretty underwhelming, or maybe just a little over the top to the point where they get kind of obnoxious. Meanwhile, the visuals, the look of it, the changeovers, the costumes, everybody sort of landing their marks and everything and being where they need to be on stage, that's kind of what was really perfect about it. Super Bowl performances are more visual than anything, because a lot of what people end up talking about afterwards is the wardrobe malfunction, oh this, oh that, it's oh this dance routine, oh these costumes. It's rarely whether or not like the performance or the singing or the musicianship was like the best, or moved me to tears or anything like that. So I think that's really the gist of my thoughts on it. Just a very average Super Bowl performance that I think we are very quickly going to forget. I mean, outside of that weird little SpongeBob transition, there wasn't really anything too odd or controversial about it or anything. And I think that's what the Super Bowl was certainly intending at this point in time, because they certainly have enough socio-political drama kind of focused on them at the moment, and they were most likely looking for a performance that looked like it was very drama-free, very risk-free, and contained a little something for everybody. We're trying to do something for everybody, have the most agreeable band on the planet perform, have a rap star from Atlanta perform, have one of the most popular rappers perform one of the most popular songs out there, you know, throw in some drums, throw in some gospel choir, and just, you know, really be heavy on the visuals, heavy on the lights, heavy on the pyrotechnics. So we're not focusing too hard on just the mediocrity of it, I guess, at the core of it. And I suppose I'll leave it at that. Those are my thoughts on that Super Bowl performance. You guys are the best. Over here next to my head is another video that you can hit up. Check that out, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Don't miss a single piece of content we do over here. And I will see you in the next one. Anthony Fantano, Super Bowl forever.